So in this last section, we look at some of the contemporary issues that you might face as a manager when it comes to HR. So we've looked at downsizing briefly before. We'll have a quick look at it again. We'll also have a look at diversity in the workplace, sexual harassment, and career development. So first of all, downsizing. Yes, we discussed it before. So this is where we're trying to decrease jobs in the organisation for whatever reason. And it can affect the morale in the team quite significantly. Not only because as soon as there's any kind of whiff of jobs being chomped, everyone seems to feel that their heads are potentially going to roll. But we can also end up with this form of survivor guilt where whoever the people that are let go, the ones that remain feel like they were either sort of lucky or they feel a sense of guilt that others who might have done just as good a job as them lost their jobs when they didn't. So we've got to be very cautious and careful when we're managing the process of downsizing. And so we have these general tips for thinking about how we work through the process of having to cut staff or shift them in different directions. So first of all, we want to be open and honest, right? And so thinking about that this is about the person. So if you're in the undesirable role of having to inform somebody that they're not going to be employed any longer, open and honest communication is really important. Letting people know as soon as possible. So it can be really awkward and uncomfortable to have to tell people that they're being let go. But again, it's not about you, it's about them. And so helping them understand why and making it personally impersonal. So what I mean by that is that it's not so much about them as a person, it's their role that's being removed or deleted, but also focusing on them as a person, their strengths, their ability to find a new job. Hopefully you can encourage that and maybe support them in some way, shape or form. We want to also make sure that we follow any of the laws that need to be followed in terms of severance pay or benefits, particularly if we're looking at redundancy, then severance pay is an entitlement that someone will get. If we can provide some kind of support or counselling or even some kind of mentorship through that process. We also want to make sure that whoever is let go, whatever role that they had, is reassigned to people who have the right skills and talents for that role, so that it's not just a case of people kind of being lumbered with stuff that they're not really tuned into. And we also want to focus on boosting the morale within the team. So not just looking at necessarily who is being let go, but the whole team. Individuals may need their own reassurance, and you want to continue that communication process and checking in with people one-on-one as well, and maintaining that level of involvement and availability. So not an enviable part of being a manager, but sometimes necessary. So these days we have the idea that's generally speaking supported by research to suggest that the more diverse the workplace, the better the productivity and the performance of the organisation. And that's because we're getting a diversity of viewpoints, diversity of backgrounds that can then come to any ideas with different sets of eyes and different perspectives. And so generally speaking in the music industry, we want to be able to get people who are right for the job, but also have that diversity that can then bring those different worldviews, different ways of approaching tasks and problems, and connecting to different communities as well. So some ways that we can be thinking about doing this is, first of all, widening the recruiting net. So that means not only just, you know, whoever's there, that here's about a job, off you go, here we go, have this job, but starting to think about how might we start to recruit beyond just the immediate people, to try and find the best person for the job who also might be able to enhance and bring those different perspectives in. And we might consider non-traditional recruitment methods. So that might mean going into specific demographics and trying to source people from, say, within groups that sit within specific demographics, going outside of specific geographical regions, whatever it is that you would normally do, trying to think of different ways beyond that. We also want to make sure that we're avoiding discrimination in selection. So not only does it put us in a legal problem if we are discriminating in the recruitment process, but we're also potentially making one of those selection errors if we are discriminating in this selection process and we end up rejecting someone who was going to be great at the job because of a discrimination problem that we had in that process. And then once we actually recruit people who may be some kind of minority within the organisation's culture, and that can be anything from a gender minority, a sexuality minority, ethnic minority, an ability minority in terms of, you know, someone might have a disability that is not common within the organisation. How can we build a sense of belonging for that person so that they feel that they are part of this organisation and have a sense of unity with the other team members is very important in terms of having that person feel at ease and comfortable within the organisation and not feeling like they're an outsider. We also want to try and increase diversity awareness with the current staff. So that can be, you know, as much about trying to find common ground as well as trying to understand and celebrate our distinctive differences. So I don't know, maybe we want to have different music days where people bring in their favourite artist and everyone shares their favourite artist, and we then sort of work out which artists do we have in common, which ones do we love, which ones have we never heard before. We can do it with food, all sorts of different ways to try and understand different perspectives and what they bring to the organisation. And like similar to what I spoke about in this one about the organisational culture, when someone new enters the organisation, it can be quite intimidating, particularly if you look around and people aren't like you. So having the ability to provide that transition and potentially a customised orientation, often something like a mentor or buddy for anyone, but especially for someone who may be of some kind of minority within the organisation, can help provide that smooth transition. Sexual harassment, I'm sure you all have some familiarity with. Essentially, the reason we want to avoid sexual harassment is that it makes people feel uncomfortable. It makes them feel threatened and excluded within the work environment, and so it really diminishes their experience of work. In addition to that, there's legal obligations that as managers and organisations we need to be aware of, and sexual harassment is often in the media. It's in the media at the moment, and it can be a really costly issue for organisations, and it's becoming something that people are more and more willing to speak out about. So the less it happens, the better, as well as the better the experience of working in an organisation everyone will have, and the less risk that will be attached to you as a manager and the organisation that you are working for. And so then our last topic is the idea of career development. And so traditionally this was, you know, we had these workplaces where you would start at the bottom and you would work up, and over time you would become more and more senior, and then you'd rise, and then you'd get a gold watch at the end of your 40 years or whatever. That's less and less the case now in the modern workforce. And so career planning, which is the idea of where are you going to go, how are you going to develop over your career, what might be the different roles that you would undertake as you gain more experience, as you gain seniority. people tend to take that on themselves these days and need to navigate that on their own, which can be quite challenging, particularly as most people these days don't have a very clear career path and tend to kind of wander a little bit more around and change careers. So typically we'll have up to, you know, often more than 5 different career paths over the course of our lifetime. And so being able to navigate that can be quite challenging. And as a manager, we sort of want to be trying to keep it in mind, both in terms of our own career development, what might be my next step, what might be the direction that I want to take my career in, what do I particularly enjoy in my role, and how can I do more of that? And if there's a particular direction that I want to go in, what would be the skills that I might need to develop in order to get there, and how might I continue to build on those skills in the role that I'm in? And then as a manager, part of your responsibility is to assist your team in doing that process as well. And that can involve everything from just being observant about, well, what is this person good at, and how can I encourage them to do more of that and help them develop their own understanding of their strengths, their aspirations, their own potential, as well as helping them navigate within the organisation what might be some potential options if they want to go further. And if it's outside the organisation, or the organisation doesn't have capacity for what they're wanting to do, because maybe it's too small, or the organisation doesn't work in that particular area, can I assist them to get there and take that long view that maybe we'll work together at some other point in the future? I think we would all want that as an ideal manager, and as someone who is interested in our own career development as much as their own.